Hey, Martin.
To unmute. Now I'm unmuted. Hello, Ruth.
How are you?
Yes, I'm good. Well, the last day before the public holidays, I even forgot such a stressful week. I forgot to remind you all about the upcoming 4x4. Uh, what to do. Yeah. Yeah, because I set up a WhatsApp link to those people who attend on a regular basis, and I remind you. And yeah, and this week I was so busy that I even missed the reminders that people sent me for doing so. So how are you?
Good, good.
Any news what the war is doing?
Any news about what?
About the war and what is going on? I heard that the on Saturday there will be negotiations with between the US and Iran.
Yeah, who knows? My perspective is that, it's we're spending a lot of money. We've spent 25 billion so far. Um,
Okay.
and there's a lot of people who are saying, what do we have to show for that? Which is nothing, um, other than driving prices up and, some economies on the brink. Um, so it's a little concerning there, but um, I- it really sort of depends which political, side you're on, whether or not you
Okay.
think that, we're sort of going in the right direction or not going in the right direction. I mean, it's two polar opposites, right? Um, some of the people think that we're crazy for doing this, and other people are like, yeah, we had to do it, and blah blah blah. So um, somewhere in the middle is probably the truth, right? Um, it's just not evident yet to me. Um, I know that Pete Hegseth, which is our Secretary of Defense, was asking for, um, I forget the total number. I think it was like 1.2 or 1.5 trillion with a T, dollars
Uh-huh.
for for the defense budget.
Okay, which is 1,200 or 1,500 billion.
Yeah, yeah.
And that means that the 25 billion spent so far is just a drop in
Yeah,
the sea.
25 billion compared to that is,
Mhm.
like you said, a
Yeah.
drop in the bucket, right? So,
Yes.
all these things are, sort of a weight on the American public. The interesting thing is that I find it interesting is that, the markets, the financial markets continue to be strong and corporate earnings still are strong. And we have prices, of gas that we haven't seen in a very, very long time. And
Since
prices.
2008, I would say. 2008 was the last time it was like that. I dug out my old archives and I found oil, Brent or crude oil at 170. That was almost 20 years ago. And now we are at 100 or something, by far not where we were.
Yeah. So, so there's just a collage of different things going on, and it's very difficult to try to, come to some kind of projection of, where's this taking us at this juncture, because there's just so many things that are so dynamic right now, right?
Yeah.
And frankly, in my opinion, is that we will never come to an agreement with Iran. Is my opinion.
Yes. Yeah. It's because these guys, when you think that you're there and you can close the deal or whatever, and then they would find another loophole out and start the whole thing again. That's my assessment from what I know.
And I agree with that. But I think the more important thing is this for them. I think that they're trying to, basically say, oh, you know what, we can just wait Trump out because
Yeah.
after the midterms, he's probably going to lose a lot of power. And, that's October. So let's try to, keep it going. And then, we're going to have less of a threat from the U.S. at that point in time.
Oh.
I think that that's their strategy, frankly.
Mhm.
I think their other part of their strategy is to stay in power and not relinquish anything,
Mhm.
from a power-based standpoint.
Yes.
So, and frankly, if we allow that to happen, then all this time and money and effort have been a waste.
Yes. And the 25 billion would be multiplied by a factor of 2 or 3 until you're there, just to find out that there's it's delayed. Okay, but what I have done last Saturday, I used the entire day for evaluating the situation, both from a geopolitical point of view and also from a military historical point of view. Not because I'm so smart, but I studied a few speeches that people have given. Actually, I studied about 5 or 6 hours of speeches, and I derived a few trigger points for small companies or small and medium-sized companies that cannot be overlooked. And each trigger point would trigger other measures, and is quite serious. I would say currently we are close to the trigger 1 of 4, and that is when rationing of fuel happens, and in several regions at the same time. And we see that in Europe and also in Asia, in some countries, but not to a big extent. But And as a first measure, I personally avoid traveling. So I would be in Germany in 2 weeks from now, but I have just postponed that trip for the situation to become more relaxed. But I think it's quite serious. And the trigger point number 2 would be if the Strait of Hormuz and also other seaways are permanently closed. Currently, I don't know whether I would say it's permanently closed because every now and then there is one ship sneaking through, either because they pay the ransom to Iran or they make it in another way or whatever. But that would be and the Iranian friends in Yemen have started to close down the shipping through the Suez Canal that connects the Mediterranean with the Indian Ocean. And so it's all about, it's like an unfinished cheese wedge for the trigger 2. And the trigger 3, if that happens, the trigger 3 would be that there would be capital flow restrictions. Means you cannot easily send money from one country to another on a larger scale. And trigger 4 would be if there's a direct attacks against Qatar with the gas production, the LNG production, and the oil of Saudi Arabia, which those cheap drones can easily reach. And also if the UAE, the Dubai, and the Abu Dhabi infrastructure is attacked, water mostly, and but not only, also solar. So these are my 4 trigger points, and currently we are just below the trigger 1. And another warning sign: the Singapore administration has given us a warning. I mean, the Singapore SMEs to hold cash, and more cash is better. The more the merrier. And there's also an initiative going on here that the local banks would supply the local SMEs with cash. And you take it in the form of a loan, which is backed up by the government, partly. And interest rate is not too high, so everybody can afford. But so that's part of the measures here in Singapore. And yeah, I found it quite serious to find myself in such a situation here and to see it, because in Germany, people don't talk about that openly at all. Or is it different? Because we have Roland here, right?
Yeah, I'm
I
here.
can see. Yeah.
Yeah, I'm here.
Any
Any comments on the situation? Yeah, oh, okay.
any
Well,
special warnings from the German side? I don't know.
no real special warnings. I mean, gasoline prices are up, as you can imagine. And we both remember the situation back in 1973, where
Yes.
people were banned from using the highways on during weekends because
Yes.
of a shortage of oil. This is not yet the case. Prices are up, and everybody, of course, feels this in its wallet, because when I have to fill my tank, I paid 25% more than before the Iran war. There have been some warnings, so to say, that the first sector which really might feel it is aviation, because there seems to be a severe shortage of kerosene.
Yes.
So maybe I think it's the same all over the world. So probably international travel and inter-European travel will have some shortages. But apart from that, there are no special warnings. So I was very interested in hearing what you said about your additional trigger points. You said trigger point 2 was the closing of the Strait of Hormuz. Is that correct?
Plus other seaways.
Plus other seaways. Okay. As a matter of fact, we are there. So, and people fight over who actually closes the Strait of Hormuz because Iran closed it and the United States closed it. So it's a double closure. And
Mhm.
of course, the few tankers sneaking through or paying ransom money, they are not sufficient to revive world economy. That's absolutely clear.
Uh-huh. Yeah, but
So,
to me, the trigger two would mean, I would say, Strait of Hormuz, yes, is 95% or 99% closed, and then there's also the Suez Canal by the Yemen people, Houthis, I believe is their name. I don't know, and yeah, that yeah, but again, it's not 100% the trigger two. I would say is 90. Yeah, maybe 80 or 80%, at least what I know, because we are much better off than 20 years ago because we have internet with the news. Um, so we can, but is more like, yeah, there's no binary trigger one is on and or off, or trigger two is on or off. Is something between 0 and 1, and but we don't have capital flow restrictions yet. And I believe this is why the Singapore government is preparing us for what the Singapore government is preparing us for. Yeah.
yeah, talking about flows of restrictions of flows of financial means, it's interesting. Where did you get this trigger point from? Because the funny thing is, financial flows can mostly be, or can to 95% be shut down by the United States. Because as far as I know, they own most of the infrastructure which really supports international money flows. I mean, all the credit card systems, they are US American, as far as I know. So, what would be the factors affecting international money flow in your scenario?
Okay, what I can tell you is what is happening. The money flow from Dubai, out of Dubai, is heavily restricted. Much money sits there and cannot be touched. And a lot of that went out to Hong Kong and to Singapore. I know that because I see it. And so I don't think that the US was involved in that. I believe it's from the Dubai government or the people who have a say over the banks. Yeah, and sometimes it's only because a country decides, no, we don't let money in. I always said this 20 years ago or so, or 15 years ago, I bought a house in Brazil, and I wanted to send the money over from Europe, and I couldn't send it to Brazil because the Brazilian government decided that I need to pay some agents to do some formalities work, and they just didn't want it. So the money was kept in a limbo or so until I pulled it back to Europe. That was during the Greek Euro crisis in in 2011 or 12 or something like that. And so I pulled it back, and we all thought that the euro might collapse anytime until Draghi said whatever it costs. And I paid it in another way from, other way. It's not so important now. But I have felt on my own how a capital flow interruption would happen. And for me, that was a very small amount of money as compared with what the millionaires and billionaires have in Dubai. But
Okay.
a lot of it got out, and it could be right that if Abu Dhabi is attacked or whatever, or Saudi Arabia is attacked or whatever, that the money that is kept by investors there at the banks cannot flow out anymore.
Okay, so
But not only that.
Sorry, please continue.
Not only there, but it could be that if you have the wrong nationality and you are in a country that is friend with one of the parties, and then you cannot transfer it anymore because you have just the wrong nationality.
So Martin, wouldn't you think that crypto then would be really skyrocketing?
If you, yeah, that's why I think that Bitcoin is not so much an asset to invest in, but is a payment system. And as long as it's used as a payment system, it probably would gain in value. Yes. I don't know. I don't follow crypto. I had Bitcoin at a very early. I spoke about it earlier, right? When it was very early and very cheap, I bought for $500, and that was the best investment in my life. And I still keep some, but not much. And yeah, maybe I can pay a few things with it. But I never look at the price of it, because for me it's only a means for transferring values from one country to another without going through the normal banking system. Yeah.
Yeah, I'm just, I bring it up just because of its ability to circumvent,
Yeah.
you know, the usual.
I do not, when people ask me, do you recommend Bitcoin? Then I said, just keep a 1 month spending in Bitcoin, and then I believe that is not bad. But I wouldn't put my farm on Bitcoin. But yeah, sure. But I heard that in very bad times in Germany, people were even paying with piss pots, from new piss pots made from aluminum. So that this can also be a currency in bad times. But I'm not sure whether it gets so bad. But yeah, that's one way of looking at it. Yeah. So and that's a measure. So currently, I would say we are for trigger 1 and trigger 2. Trigger 1 at 95%, but not 100. Trigger 2 at maybe 80%. Yeah, or 80% both, and trigger 3 maybe 10%, and trigger 4 5%, because the attacks of the Iranians, they are over, I believe, for the time being. I don't know what is going on.
So quickly, just run down that list again of the trigger points so I can write them down.
Yes. Trigger 1 is fuel rationing in several regions at the same time. The trigger 2 is the permanent closure of the Strait of Hormuz in the first place, plus other seaways like the Suez Canal. Trigger 3 would be capital flow restrictions, and trigger 4 would direct attacks on Qatar, UAE, and Saudi Arabia. And not only secondary targets, but primary targets, which means energy, oil, infrastructure like water, desalination plants. If that happens, that's really red alert for everything. Then better duck, I would say. Yeah. And the problem is, as you said, Rich, but once you have a conflict, and then suddenly it becomes a multilateral conflict, that people bring their friends in, and the friends do not only fight for the original fight, but they bring in their own fight, and then it becomes uncontrollable. It really is, and you cannot easily stop it, because it's like a big forest fire in a dry forest, and you never know where it starts again, and you find yourself in the middle, trapped and and dying because of a fire that started behind you when you didn't expect it there, and because you went in with a fire in front of you that you successfully fought. Yeah.
So are these trigger points your interpretations, or are they?
I've compiled it from a number of people that I respect in the financial area, and in the geopolitical area, and in the military history area.
Gotcha. Okay.
Plus my own experiences in the past and what I heard. Yeah, my family went through both world wars, plus through all the ups and downs that came with them from a German perspective. Yeah. So
Martin,
And I just try to make it ready so I'm not surprised when things happen. And
So
then-
these trigger points rely upon a combination or
Yes.
a sequence of occurrence, right?
yeah, something what would make it worse? And okay, one rocket shot more doesn't really make things worse, but it's the result of it and what and and you okay, you can close one seaway and another one, but there would still be 4 major ones or 5 major ones, and those are not in the conflict zone. Like for example, the Panama Canal, that would be one seaway that can be closed. If that happens, something is really bad. Or then there's also the what is called Ärmel Canal, the small
Channel.
passage between the British Islands and the continent. So that is another one. Another one would be the one to the Baltic Sea. And I believe then we are almost there. Then there's another one, an important one, very up north of Japan. Yeah. But yeah. So I was just making it so if that happens, and then yeah, we need to be very careful, and especially for as we're talking about small and medium-sized enterprises, what to do. I mean, when you run a small company, then you're just there where you are, right? And there's not much choice. You cannot move much. And just to give you an idea, if I want to fly from Singapore to Munich, there's essentially there are 2 ways of doing it. The first one would be, this is easy but quite a bit far. So you go to Africa and stay away from Saudi Arabia and go. You must go very south because you have all those unsafe regions, Ethiopia and Somalia and whatever. So you should, I would say, aim at Kenya, for example, or maybe South Africa, and then from there north. That's quite safe. The second one would be you start from Singapore, you fly up north to Thailand, and then turn left, India, and then you fly through all those Stan countries in the north of those Middle East states. And the problem is when you get far enough, then suddenly you reach the area of the Ukraine, the Black Sea, and and at the narrowest point, there's a 30-kilometer wide passage where the aircrafts can fly through 100% safe, because the rockets from the Ukrainians cannot reach you, and the Russians, I mean, I wouldn't shoot at you, the Russians, right? I would say it's more the Ukrainians. And in the south you have the Iran, and because the leadership has been decapitated during the first weeks, now the Iranians, they are more like autonomous states. So if one warlord decides this and the other one decides that, then you may or may not be able to do something. And for an aircraft, and they even have fighter jets, you cannot predict what happens. So the pilots, they don't take that risk. And the problem is now that those aircrafts who fly that route, they cannot deviate to the north and south. And this means if there's a thunderstorm on the way, they have to fly through the thunderstorm. And there was one flight where 3 passengers got injured despite being buckled up in the seat, because the aircraft went through the thunderstorm and the passengers were less resilient than the aircraft. And it's something that I don't want, because I had that before. And I don't want to go right through a thunderstorm in an aircraft. It's really bumpy and it's not nice. And then the children start to cry, the women start to cry, and the men who behave like women, they also start to cry, and then it's not nice. Yeah. And is not a nice situation anyway. So when you are the only thing that holds you in your seat is the seat belt, and yeah, but you have to go through that, and it takes half an hour yeah, half an hour average, and that's the longest half an hour in your life, I promise. So I don't if there's no really true reason for me to take that, I wouldn't do. I would just rather stay put here in Singapore because there's so much to do here also. Yeah, so that was one thing, half an hour, but I believe it was worth it because we have an international circle and we can share our insights from all around the globe. Now we span from Asia over Europe to the US, and I believe it's quite unpolitical here. So I don't think that there's someone who's supporting the war, and also there's, I mean, yeah, actively. Actually,
St.
I'm not.
Martin?
So yes,
St.
go ahead.
Martin, Michael here. So
Yes,
in
go.
all your research, I just pulled up one that I've used in the past. There's a website, the Center for International Policy. So the website is internationalpolicy.org. So once we get off today, you might want to pull it up. They give scenarios for all that's happening. And there are 5
Yeah,
or 10 articles all written within the last
yeah.
month.
Wait, the problem is I also have, and I see it. I look at it from a broader perspective. I've also seen something. There's really a change in the global, how to say, world order, I would say, and it's really visible. And I saw it confirmed by several German politicians I talked with over the past week. The new world order, which is now the old world order, was that you have people that define a certain standard of morale. Is it morale or ethics? Or yeah, they had, this is how everybody should behave. And then they added rules and outcomes power. And as long as everybody adheres to the same rules all the time, and they have more or less the same standard for the moral standards or moral ground, or the level of moral ground, then some infrastructure would develop that exercises that power. And that doesn't exist anymore. The new world order has reversed to what was before that world order. And now it is about power and interests, and from that follow rules. And it's a completely new dynamic because all those politicians who are still calculating in the old coordinate system, they are always wrong. And when you check out a website, the first thing is I would check is, do they take into account that this coordinate system has changed? If yes, I don't even request them to calculate fully in the new coordinate system, which is, by the way, the natural coordinate system. I just would like to know, where are they? And I was on when was it? Friday? No. Friday, probably. I was at the reception of the German Chamber of Commerce here in Singapore, and there was the high-ranking official of the German Ministry of Economics in Singapore, and he gave a speech, and he lamented that the world order is changing, and he wants the rule-based world order back. And I was just thinking, well, what politician is this who is still fixed to the old system that is obviously no longer in force, because you have essentially three very big powers now. And just today I saw a speech of the German Chancellor Friedrich Merz, and he lamented in the same way. He said that and he also realized what is the purpose of this. The purpose is to design Europe out of the new system, because Europe has no power without relying on the US. And so for me, hearing that same classification from such powerful, knowledgeable people, I would say, confirms that what I see and I analyzed is not so far-fetched. And so I would today, nowadays, when I hear someone talking about geopolitics, I always would like to know, where does this guy come from? Is he relying on the system that he would take a high moral ground and then derive rules that are commonly acknowledged and then wants to exercise power? If yes, then you would hear, I would say, a declining voice, because that system doesn't come back. I believe that's gone. And yeah, so in very short words, so I don't know what your website says. I may check it out later, but I can. My suspicion is that this is still run by people who want the old system back. And I believe we as countries, as small, not US, right? Like smaller countries, like Germany and Singapore, we should learn to live with this multipolar system, multidimensional system of powers, and learn how to behave. And I'm not sure. Actually, I'm very critical about the European Union, whether they can put so much together that they also would create a power that can contribute to the rules by following their own interest. Because in Europe, there is no uniform interest at all. While there is one in the US, and there is one in Asia, and there is one in Russia. Yeah, so that's the much larger picture, I would say. And for me, it's natural, because I've seen both systems working, because when I was in the German army until 1986, and later in NATO and the Canadian Army until 1990, it was still the old system. And NATO was the power. And after Russia went bankrupt in 1991, we thought that now is the time we can install a system of peace, and then all this old system declined with the old system. And yeah, that's now 35 years ago. And very few people remember those times, because the ones that were in power when I was young are now dead. And those in my peers in my same age, they have not seen so much from outside where they were. And I was just put, by chance, I was put into other countries. So I could see the same thing. Yeah. So, but it doesn't help to lament. You must act. And the problem is in Germany that currently the government is in a deadlock, because there are the socialists that work together with the conservatives, and they only can rely on 70% of the voters. And the other 30% of the voters and their representatives are excluded because they are not taking part in that system. So that's what I see. So it's very difficult to build some power, and the chancellor is very good in stating what he wants to do, but what follows is by far not what he promised originally. So, and as Germany is, I would say, one of the two big powers in Europe that govern what happens, and France currently is very weak. It's not a good outlook.
Okay.
Yeah. And he said, even the chancellor said, that he can foresee that if they do not become powerful, that Europe would be diminished to be of. He literally said this, and before I started here the meeting, I was trying to download the speech that he gave. It was the Deutsche Arbeitgebertag, the German Employers Association, the largest association of its kind in Germany. And this 2026 happened only a few days ago, I believe. And yeah, so the fact that he also sees this tells me that something is there. And he's definitely not stupid. He may be not the strongest personality, but I believe he's an intelligent guy.
Okay.
Anyway, the other thing I wanted to talk about was the Christoph Hering's talk last week. And I got lots of questions from people because of the things that were said during that talk. And especially I said, can we get some data correct? Because just for comparison, the German car industry, Germany on German soil, produced in 2017 roughly 5.2 million cars. That was 8 years ago. That was the max. And the production on German soil went back from 5.2 to 4.2 until, per year, 4.2 million per year until February last year or March. And I believe in March or in April, President Trump came with his idea of tariffs. And in that single month, was it March or April? I forgot. The German car production on German soil fell by 800,000 because this is the number of cars that were produced on German soil and later shipped to the US. So within 1 month, the car manufacturing in Germany went down by 800,000, which is 20% of the total production. And these cars were still built, but not in Germany, outside of Germany. And that's my point. So when you compare production of brands, it doesn't say anything because Volkswagen is still one of the largest car manufacturers in the world. Just that they are not making so many cars in Germany anymore. They are making them outside. And for each manufactured car in Germany, there are 3 to 4 workplaces in Germany. So in order to make, no, wrong. For each manufactured car in Germany, there is 1 workplace. So for the 4 million produced car on German soil, there were 4 million people working, either full or part-time. 1 million of them, for the 4 million, were working for the OEMs, the brands in Germany. And for each workplace with a manufacturer in Germany, there are 3 others outside with small and medium-sized companies. They're called suppliers, and they're grouped into tier 1 to tier 3, and the tiers is what size or what part of the production they take. And Michael, this is very different from US manufacturers because in Germany, those 3 other people that are contributing to producing 1 car per year, they work in companies that have a size from 10 to maybe 5,000 people. And very, very few large-scale tier 1 suppliers are there. One of them is Bosch, another one is ZF, Zahnradfabrik Frieshofen, another one is Schaeffler, Continental, and so on and so on. Yes, all these, they have worldwide 30, 40, 50,000 or maybe even 150,000. Just in Germany, not so many. And if you shift out the car production from German soil towards somewhere else, then all those suppliers would also be reduced. And currently, because of the reduction of the German soil car production by 1 million since last year, alone 800,000 for the export to the US, resulted in 1 million lost workplaces, of which 200,000 or 150,000 were with OEMs, the brand, the manufacturers, and the tier 1 suppliers. and the other 600,000 were in tier 2, tier 3 suppliers, which is SMEs from, as I repeat myself, 10 to 5,000 employees. And I believe that structure is very different from the US, and as we have seen in Christoph Hering's talk, also very different from the Chinese manufacturing. He has shown us a picture of a, I believe, BYD factory that makes 1 million cars per year, which is 25% of the German car production in total. And then I have said, okay, there must be 1 million people living nearby. And then he said, oh, it's all automated. And I said, okay, I would like to know how many people do they need to make this 1 million cars? In Germany, we need 1 million. That's what I can say. And then Michael, you came and said, that cannot be because a car is $50,000. How can one person live from 50,000 revenue, right? This is where you came from.
Martin, here, let's go back. Several weeks ago, I thought the metric, the KPI that you were using was 2 to 3 or 3 to 4 man years per German car. That's when I came back to you and I said, well, do these people make 10,000 euros a year or do they make 45,000? So now you're on a different metric. You're saying one German laborer per car. So that's more reasonable. But the KPI that people use is sales per employee. So all your comment about the suppliers, let's just put all the value, economic value added. So if there's another 2 to 3 people within the suppliers, are you still saying it takes 3 to 4 German people somewhere in the world to put out a Volkswagen Passat or a Porsche? If it takes that many man years, how do those numbers make sense?
No, I wouldn't call it man years. I would call it, this is how in general it is put. You have the German output per year until last year in March was 4.2 million cars per year. And those 4.2 million cars involved roughly the same number of people. And of which 20% were working for the brands, the manufacturers, the car OEMs themselves. So 800,000 I don't know, take them all together. There are not so many. There's Volkswagen, Opel, BMW, Mercedes, Audi, and Ford. That's it. And those together, each one of them, let's say on German soil, I'm talking right only about Germany. German soil, one car, and there would be 0.2 employees from the OEMs and 0.8 employees from the tier 1 to tier 3 suppliers. It's distributed. So you cannot say...
Okay, but Martin, if you take cost of goods sold, that's just the labor content. What about the materials? What about the plant burden, the overhead, and the profit, and the general sales and administrative on the P&L?
I'm not talking about...
It doesn't make sense though, Martin. Even one person per car is way too high. And BYD probably has 10 cars per person with automation. And, so sales per employee is an important metric.
I'm only talking about the data that I have access to. I'm not a financial expert, number one. I'm only a patent attorney, and I can tell you what I see and what makes sense. So the overall, this is how they calculate. You have 4 million people in companies working to produce 4 million cars. And I simplify now a bit. It may be 4.2 million cars and it may be 3.6 million people. Something like that probably. But roughly, you cannot say then from the 4 million for 4 million, you cannot say 1 for 1 because it's split up into a whole network. It's like a tree with branches. And that also explains to me, together with what Christoph Hering has told us last time, that why the Chinese are so much faster than the Germans in developing a new car. He has said that a new car is built within 1.5 years, while in Germany, a new car would take 5 or 6 years to design until it's running. And then he brought some graphics, and he called it StageGate. I'm not so sure whether it's really StageGate, but it's more a staggered approach through the various departments of a company. And the Chinese, and he condensed it, and he said they do everything at the same time. And then I asked, are they still talking with each other, or do they know where they want to go in 1.5 years from now, and they automatically do what is required? And I'm quite sure that they have some talks. And then he said, that's because they all sit on the same premise. They can easily discuss with each other whenever they want. And then they drive it forward in an agile way, like Scrum in software. And it's a, yeah, but a pity that he's not there. So I have dug out the other book that we know about how R&D is done in China, and we talked about this a year ago or so, and it's called How Apple Got to China. And the name of the author is, let me look it up, Apple. And this guy examined how Apple got to China and how they became so powerful. The title of the book is Apple in China, The Capture of the World's Greatest Company, Patrick McGee. And I checked that book, whether it says the same thing as what Christoph told us. And the book confirms that, which means that the Chinese have learned from making Apple phones how to develop good products in very short time by applying incremental improvements with a very fast pace or very fast cadence of repeating improvements. And so the Chinese, they don't go for breakout, breakthrough, whatever. They start from what they want to achieve and then create some sort of platform and put a lot into software. And that is actually the way how Apple phones became as they are today. And if you look at Apple phones, the steps from one to the next generation is always incremental. But the Apple iPhone, I have a iPhone 14, is much better than the iPhone 7. That's for sure. And my other insight was when I compared the German way of making cars with the Chinese way of making cars, that is exactly what causes the long cycles of innovation of years, 5, 6 years. Because if you want to build a new car, you not only need a new car, you also must make it somehow. And then you must trickle down and break up the new car so that every supplier can contribute his little 0.5% share to the car. And for me, that makes completely sense. And the funny thing is that the Chinese learned it from Apple and now apply it to all the industries, and that also to all those little giants. Rich, that is one of your favorite theme, right?
Yeah, that is one of my favorite topics. And I think I expressed to the group here that the whole premise of what Apple taught the Chinese goes back to a theory that's an academic theory, and it's called absorptive capacity. And that absorptive capacity has basically, driven the Chinese development of manufacturing capability. And then they built on that theory to basically, leverage their manufacturing capability, which then allowed them to penetrate global markets, and it feeds on itself, right? So,
Yeah.
And then of course, all of the little giants are coming along, and that gentleman that I had done some work with at University of Illinois, David, he's now the CEO of a company in China. He's
Yes,
Chinese
I remember. Yes,
and at
interesting.
Helsi. And I mean, they're going to ship 4 million LiDAR units this year is their, forecast. They're the largest manufacturer of LiDAR now in China. I mean,
Wow.
they're a perfect example of a little giant. I mean, it's freaking amazing.
Yes. And you knew him as a student or something like that, right?
Yeah, he was working on his PhD when I was working with a team in one of the engineering labs on a orthotic and prosthetic device.
Okay. Yeah. So, yeah, I believe that Apple phone, the iPhone, and how Apple used China. I mean, the whole book confirms what Christoph has told us last week. That the car industry is nothing else than the Apple iPhone story applied to cars.
Say, Martin, I think it's a little different, and I sent you something for what are called platforms. Okay, so the K car, that platform ran for 15 years, and they could do a chassis for a sedan, and they could also put a minivan on it. I sent you links for Volkswagen and Audi and Mercedes. The Mercedes
Yeah.
124 platform took 7 years in development, but so many other Mercedes before and after went from drawing board to production in 3 years, Martin. So it's an entire spectrum, and you have to look at platforms. Again, Iacocca and the K car, they milked that stooge for 15 years. And yes, they changed the headlights and the rear bumper and a little bit of the interior, but the chassis, the running gear, the engine families ran for 15 years with the K car. So there are certain
Yeah, yeah.
Mercedes platforms that have run 9 years. I think the 124 went from 1984 to 1992, Martin. It was the 300 class, and it was called a
Yes, yes.
260. Yeah, so
Yeah.
you're trying to say the Chinese do it better. Look at Tesla. They don't come out a new model every year. They have their platforms. And BMW is the same way. There's the 3 Series, 5 Series, and 7 Series. Those series have been around in BMW for 50 years.
Yep.
Okay.
I'm just repeating what I heard last week. I'm not an expert in the car industry, and maybe becoming one, maybe. But what I heard is that the German cars, they need 5 to 6 years and a new platform. Yeah, maybe for a new platform. But somehow the Chinese do it in 1/3 of the time, and it's not because they work 3 times more or they're
Well,
3 times smarter.
EVs are a lot easier than hybrids or ICEs. To do a new
Mhm.
engine at any car company in the world, you could ask Toyota this in Japan. To do a new engine design could take 5 years of R&D, another year to tool it and put it into production. I don't think the Chinese are very good at making internal combustion engines. They might be good on electrics at BYD, and
No, no.
they've got some hybrids.
You
But I
you
don't
would be
think their engines
surprised.
are worth. Sorry?
You would be surprised. There are lots of Chinese cars now in Germany that have an internal combustion engine.
How long does that engine last? Is it a throwaway?
Don't ask me. I don't know.
Well,
I've,
in my humble opinion, the ones I've seen are basic. They don't have the service shops. They don't have the fuel quality. I mean, a
uh-huh.
Chinese engine would be like, in 1950s, it'd be
Yeah,
considered worldwide as
yeah.
a throwaway. It's a throwaway.
Anyway, but using what we are talking about and over and over and over, and it's like walking around a forest, and now I realize the more and more the big picture and also the trees, the single trees, and I understand much better. If you show to me a graph that, like Christoph did to us last, everybody else and in the room, or not everybody, but most of the others, they're just surprised by the result. Okay, China now 20 million cars per year, Germany 4 million. The biggest factory in China, 1 million cars per year in just in one place. And now I wanted to know more. How do they do that? And then Christoph says, oh, they do a new car within 2 years. I said, okay, how do they do that? And do they talk with them? He doesn't really know. He says, yes, they all sit together and talk often. But what system are they applying? And then I read the China book about Apple and how they make, and I just see the pattern better. And now Rich says, okay, there are 1,000 little giants, and they all grow. Like now he has seen one little giant from the PhD lab in the US to the producing 4 million LiDAR systems per year. Is the biggest LiDAR producer in China. And Rich has seen it under his nose, right, Rich? That's quite surprising, I find. It's really not something that you see every day. And now put all the pieces together and try to derive something from it. I believe that something
I
in
mean,
the philosophy.
I was just really shocked when, I found out that, David was CEO of, that company, and a co-founder, right? I mean, he and another gentleman started that company, and I mean, it's just freaking amazing. So, and they have offices around the world now in California and here in the U.S. and in Europe as well. And they're conquering the automotive industry. Plus, the robotics industry is the other key market that they're servicing.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I mean, but we can see, we can look at the structure and have more insight than others. Others can only see, 4 million LiDAR systems per year. Quite amazing, but how do they get there? And I get a much better idea how they made it, and that I believe that helps also smaller companies because, yeah, did I tell you about the guy with the electric system who tries to develop everything ready, and then I see this pattern over and over. I can tell people write books, do talks, and do that, and send people away telling don't do that, and still they continue doing that. It's somehow deep inside the human beings that some technicians would follow their own ideas and try to develop the product ready. And only when the product is ready would they think about how to sell it. And the Chinese do it in a very different way. And Chinese buyers are also willing to be the beta testers for the products. They're not shy of doing so because they know that the companies would update their vehicles software. By the way, that opens another can of worms. Do you want your car connected to the manufacturer so that they can run updates as they want? In Europe, that would create a major data security allergy.
Same in
Yeah.
United States, if the cars are made by Chinese made.
Yeah. So
By
anyway,
the way,
yes.
do you allow me 1 minute, Martin?
Yeah, okay. Go ahead.
Your assessment of European and German car industry has been on the spot for the last 3 years, but now there are some reactions. I just put into the chat a link which shows how Mercedes is going to react to the Chinese threat. Maybe they heard some of Christoph Herring's speeches or presentations, because they're doing exactly what is required for the Chinese market. So just follow the link and you see what they're trying to do. This is a complete changed policy, and it addresses the needs of the specific Chinese market. So
Cool.
maybe there's a way into the future.
Yeah, good. Okay, thank you all. I wish you a very nice public holiday. The 1st of May, I believe, is a holiday all over the world, right? So enjoy your extended weekend and see you again next week. Thank you again for coming. Goodbye.
Yep. Take care.